us honest when it comes to pronunciation of names. So we have to get it right while he's still around.
It's not
Okay,
working.
I'm starting the recording.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Andrew. Thank you and welcome to everybody to the November 2020 Global Board of Directors meeting. This meeting is recorded. So as a first item, so we'll review the previous, it's been a while since I did this. From the board present, in the order that I can see everybody, Grant, Sharif, Gary, Martin, Richard, Vandana, myself on Pendlebury, and from future board we have Jubin, hopefully I pronounced that right, and we have Andrew, Lisa, and Tom Papas. First call to order is the previous month's board meeting minutes. If this will open. I hope everybody's had a chance to review them and had any input. The motion is to approve the previous month's board meeting minutes. Can I have a second?
I'll second.
Second.
Sharif seconds. So in the order that I can see everybody, Grant?
Yes.
Sharif?
Yes.
Gary?
Yes.
Martin?
Yes.
Richard?
Yes.
Vandana?
Yes.
And I'm
But I have a question.
Yeah.
I was present for the last board meeting. My name is not there. Am I missing anything?
Let me just go back and confirm that. Dawn puts these together. I'll find out. Okay.
Yeah, I think
Because
Martin couldn't pronounce it correctly, so they didn't put it in there.
because I don't think I have missed any of the board meetings ever.
No,
Okay.
you were here, Vandana. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll put an action item to get you on.
Yeah, thank
It could
you.
have just been the case even of minutes. I think you have to attend 80% or something of the meeting, or 70%. I can't remember what it is, but Andrew, if you wouldn't mind, and just for the record, I'm a yes on that.
Okay.
Yeah, you have to be there for 75% of the meeting.
75%. Yeah.
It might be the case that the meeting might have overshoot, but I remember being there for the whole meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it should technically be 75% of the allotted time of the meeting. If we overshoot and keep on discussing, then it's not ideal for especially as it's so late for yourself. Andrew, if you wouldn't mind taking us through the organizational KPIs.
Sure. I'm just trying to get you the link to the actual KPIs. Let me just check.
Actually, do I just for it to note, should we approve the meeting minutes from the special board meetings?
Yes, please.
As well? Yeah, sorry.
I'll get the attachment fixed for you while you're doing that.
Okay. I don't think that actually works. The link to the special board meeting.
Okay, give me one sec. I'll fix it both at the same time.
We can come back to it at the end potentially, just to save. There might be some downtime during the meeting, I guess, if that works.
Mm-hmm.
If it's going to take some time. Does it make sense to go through what's on the actual screen there in relation to the KPIs, or?
Yeah, I'm trying to get the link to the thing, and I'll paste it up so we can actually have a look. Yes. Okay, I'm going to paste into chat the video, sorry, the graph. And if you just click, the graph is not linked properly because of capitalization. For some reason, it's got capital PNG at the end. I'll fix that later. So if you could just click the link, and that's what we're doing. So this month we've gained a few members. We actually did quite well with membership at AppSec Virtual. We got about 145 new members through that mechanism. So that's good. I think we'll continue to do that. We've had a decrease in the number of visitors to our website, and there's no obvious reason as to why that might be. However, the cheat sheets is now one of the most popular parts of our website. And so we should probably do some promotions around that to actually make it more, more visible amongst the community. We have had some issues with SLAs. The chapters committee has asked us not to disband any chapters. So there are plenty of tickets that have been opened but can't be closed at the moment. We are working with the projects committee to go through the project reviews and either close them out or alternatively get those worked on so that we can get the projects promoted as required. With all of the money, I would probably wait until Tom speaks on that one, just on the basis that it seems like a huge jump of $500,000. And I think the context here is extraordinarily important. I think Tom can speak to that much better. So I won't spend any time on it now. If we go back to the minutes and just go to the executive director.
Sorry, that's definition. My mouse is not good.
Yeah, just keep going. Yeah. It's just underneath the finance report.
Yeah.
I decided to make
Sorry.
it a little bit shorter.
Yeah,
Okay,
cool.
so the election was run successfully. Bill Corrie and Jubin will be coming on. Martin is continuing. We had just over 20% of the membership vote. We will work on a mechanism or some sort of promotion to encourage more people to vote next year. I have met with Jubin and Bill. I will encourage Martin. Martin, if you want me to meet with you, I'd be more than happy to do so. I would like to meet with you because I've also met with most of the other board and it's been a while since we've talked. So if you're up for it, I'd love to have a meeting with you. Okay, good. I'll get it
Of
done.
course. Always.
Okay, there is a strategy meeting, and Martin, you actually had an objection to this one, but it was actually what the board had voted on in 2019, and I ran a doodle for 2 weeks, and that was the best I could do in terms of time slots. Is there a problem with your ability to attend?
My question was what's about the board roles will be discussed, you said, and that's
Yes.
something we do normally separately.
Okay, it's just that the actual motion that was passed in 2019 has it wrapped up into one 4-hour meeting, but I've actually made it into 2 2-hour meetings because of the virtual nature of it. And the strategy meeting on day 1 contains the first item of business is electing the new board, and then there's strategy.
Okay, then it's an official board meeting. Okay.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Okay, then it's okay. Then I misunderstood. Cool.
Sorry.
And that's what we've done. What we did last year, or this year.
Yes.
Start of the year.
But Martin's referring to the fact that the board meets prior to the first board meeting, just as an informal talk to get together,
Yes.
to learn each other.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
that's why I've posted this as a special meeting and not a public one. So we will record it, and if there's any votes, we will minute them. But I do want enthusiastic discussion, and essentially I want you to have the freedom of speaking your mind. So it won't be a public meeting. You'll get a calendar invite if you haven't already, containing the Zoom link. It won't be the standard Zoom link.
What kind of confused me because in the past we had a public and the executive meeting. So when you go to special meetings, because now you have also it's not a special meeting, the meeting minutes here. So
yeah,
it's kind of confusing for me when you keep different terms for that.
What would you like to call it?
As I said, in the past, we had an executive meeting when something was discussed in the executive level, but it's not publicly shared or a public meeting. So my question is, what is a special meeting? For me, a special meeting is either an unscheduled public meeting, or what does it make special? So that's my question, actually, for the name.
So there's 2 types of meetings that are in our bylaws. There's general meetings, which are public, and then there are special meetings. And you can choose to have special meetings as being either public or private. I am willing to take the board's view at the moment on making that session public. I'm more than happy to do so. But I think, considering that you wish to discuss strategy, I think it may make sense for it to be a private one. But the bylaws only contemplate 2 types of meetings, not executive
and
sessions.
ideally, it shouldn't be public because there needs to be discussions of roles for the upcoming year prior to the actual vote on the January board meeting. This year, I think it happened in February due to the timing of the actual first meeting, but I guess at that point in January, we should be okay.
Yep. You'll have seen that I've posted all of the board meetings for 2021 using the same last Thursday of each month, or the 4th Thursday of each month. There is only, I think, one time where it becomes difficult. So I will encourage you all to look at the schedule for next year. And if you wish to have any of the meetings rescheduled, please let me know and I can do so. You should have received an invite if you're on the next board for all of next year. November, we had a very busy month. Complimentary membership is now live. We've actually closed out the AppSec Virtual. All of the sponsors have been given their sponsor benefits. We are now evaluating the financial impact of that, and I think Tom will talk more about that in the next section. All of the policies that you enacted that were due to go live on November 1 are now up, and they're in force, but we are unsure at this very moment of all of the policies and our procedures. Are they accurate? And so commonly during our staff meetings, I would hear, but that's not how we do it. But then the policy says something else. So I've got a kickoff meeting with the staff next week to review every single policy and make sure that our procedures match the policy, because it's really important that if we are going to manage the policy, that we're actually following the policy. So that'll be coming through in December. The 2021 budget, you'll hear more about it today. And there is, I'm going to bundle the discussion of the budget up into the finance reform because they're interlinked. So I'd like to keep as much time as possible for that discussion. And I'll just read that there is a sensitive internal matter and it is progressing and it's due to be completed before the end of November. And I think you all know what that is, and I won't discuss it publicly.
Okay.
Moving on. Tom, if you wouldn't mind taking us through the financials.
Sure.
Thank you, Andrew, by the way.
Hello, everybody. So I'm going to go through this briefly because I know Andrew wants to have as much time as he can for the financial policies and the budget. But suffices to say, hopefully you've all had a chance to read this on a revenue. Actually, I'll start it this way. Thank you, Owen, for bringing that up.
No worries.
That's September. Actually, hopefully we can get a look at October.
Yeah,
I just clicked on. Sorry.
There we go. That's
I
okay.
clicked on there.
No problem.
That's not going to open.
I got us up to date last Friday.
it's an Excel spreadsheet. It probably downloaded.
Oh, is it? Yeah, I'm gonna have to stop sharing for a second.
Yeah. If you stop sharing, I have it. I can take it.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. Sorry.
That's okay.
I just have the actual program shared rather than the screen.
Can you all see my screen?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Great. So this is our year to date through October. What this is hinging on, because everything we do is on an accrual basis, that's how we report to the IRS. I've recognized all of what was accrued in deferred revenue for San Francisco against the October online event. I don't know whether that's right or wrong at this point. I've got to catch up with Kelly and Emily. But this reflects the $501,000 of net income from what we've done. If we were to take it all back and say none of it was, which I don't think will be the case, we would only be $25,000 under our net income that we budgeted for the year plus the Z forecast. So I'm saying that up front, saying that it's going to be somewhere between us showing a $200,000 positive net income through October and showing a minus 300 when our budget was actually minus 275. So what I'm saying is I believe we're either on track or a little better than what we had forecast. With that, as you can see, the conference revenue is up year to date. We're up overall. We're a little off in membership, and we're a little off in donations. As far as expenses go, we're a little higher than our budget and expenses. And what's really driving that is in the professional fees, we have legal, we have the audit in there that wasn't really in the budget. So with everything else, you know, we're under in travel, we're over in conferences, we've been there all year, but just about everything else is on track. So at this point, from a profit and loss perspective, we're either tracking right to our budget or doing better than our budget. And I'll put out a supplementary once I get a chance to catch up with Kelly and Emily next week. I'll stop there before I go on to the balance sheet. Anybody got any questions?
No.
Okay, not hearing any. Our balance sheet is still strong. Our cash position at the end of October was $1.36 million, which I don't know if you all noticed it. I had talked with Andrew and I've changed my points of note section. It's because we're hopefully going to change the financial policies. I'm focusing more on our months of reserve and what goes into that. So with 1.36, that's about 13 months of reserve for the organization because our cash burn is about 100,000 a month with payroll and everything else. If we remove the accounts payable, the PPP loan, which I'll be hopefully closing out before the end of the year, that takes about 2.5 months off. So it leaves us at 11 months of reserve. Again, a good number. The only other thing that I would point out here is we still have between AppSec EU and LASCON about $87,000 worth of unrecognized revenue. Hopefully we'll be able to recognize that at some point. So if you took that out, we've got basically about 10 months of reserve, and the national average for nonprofits before COVID was 6 months. So we're actually ahead of it and doing well with the current situation. But again, we need to be cognizant of keeping an eye on our expenses and trying to monetize whatever we can, because it's going to be a while before face-to-face meetings, I think, come back on track. So with that, I'll take any questions on our balance sheet. Okay.
Not from my side.
Not hearing any. This is like I said, what our balance sheet looks like.
So the accounts receivable is a bit up at the moment because of all the sponsors being collected at the moment. Kelly's on top of that, and I'm hopeful that we'll see a reduced AR by the time that we end the financial year.
Yeah, what I liked is, that's a good point, Andrew. What I like to see is this is actually a higher number than it was last month, but that's because we've done some more billing in the current period, and Kelly's working with my team, Marissa and Tara, to get what's out here that's collected. We went through the audit. We didn't have to take a bad debt reserve. As a matter of fact, we still have $9,000 of bad debt reserve left over from the last audit. So what that tells me is we're doing pretty good as far as AR and collections, because the auditors didn't ask us to increase it.
Very good.
Any other questions?
Not from my side.
Thanks. I have one more quick thing. So I'm pretty sure you all know that we're working towards setting up the money transfer house called Money Corp. And once that gets set up and we see that it's working, we're going to work to close down the ING bank accounts because, as Martin will attest to, they are extremely difficult to deal with, and it's a pain on him because he has to keep getting us the statements. With that, I need everybody, all the board members' name, address, and birth dates. I have it for everybody except for Gary and Richard at this point. My question is, that's the only thing that's holding our account from getting set up. Gary and Richard, if you wouldn't mind sending that to me. I know Dawn was reaching out to you all. I'd love to get that completed next week. But if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them right now.
Rich, you're muted.
On mute.
Right, so this will be used for what purpose?
That's one of the aspects that they need to set up.
No, the actual solution.
Oh, what this will be set up so that we can make payments outside of the U.S. and not have currency conversion issues and not pay $35 to $50 for a wire fee. Money Corp charges $5 per transaction.
Right, and why do you need our information?
Part of their application process is they need the name, address, and birth date of all active board members for the organization.
Okay, all right, simple. Thank you.
Yeah.
No
That's
problem. No problem.
European KYC.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the other part of it is, Rich, that once we do this, the days of chapter leaders getting some fees from their bank deducted as well will go away. So hopefully this will mean the end of people complaining about receiving $40 less than they're expecting from the expense claim. And hopefully it should speed things up as well.
Yeah, Andrew, thank you for that. Yes, that was part of the other aspect of it, is that the person that gets, or the entity or individual that gets paid out on the other side loses nothing. On top of that, we're going to close 4 accounts, which cost us money, and have 1 USD account specifically set up for OWASP VZW. That'll change, that'll lower costs, that'll lower administration, it'll lower, the effort that we have to do every month. It's all the way around.
Sorry, as I said, so there will not be any conversion loss now, right?
No, they pull USD from our account at the conversion rate at that particular point in time, and it also gets paid.
Yeah, but we also said there's another problem, is that some entities don't want to, when they sponsor a local event, they don't want to sponsor into an American bank account. Did you take this into account as well? Because when you're a company, when I do a donation to a European entity, I can deduct VAT and whatever taxes. If I sponsor a non-American entity, I have another problem. So I want to make sure that this also is guaranteed.
So Martin, that's a good question. So the Belgian nonprofit will still be in existence, and Money Corp, I checked it out because I had another client ask. They can take in funds as well as pay out funds in foreign currency. So we can have, if somebody has to make a payment to a non-USD account, they can pay it into Money Corp, who will convert it and put it into our USD account.
I believe Martin talking about is the merchant on record, because if you, the question is if the entity that is the bank account holder is the European entity or the US entity, and whether or not that difference will actually impact Martin or any European person's sort of donation or charity deductions, if you see what I mean.
So MoneyCore is an Ireland entity. So the reality is that I think if you're going to be donating in the EU, you'll be dealing with an EU bank, because that's why we're actually dealing with the Know Your Customer stuff. Many of the wire transfers require very little information, because they're licensed as a bank in Ireland, I'm pretty sure that when we receive money, it'll appear to be a European bank.
No, it's not about the bank. It's more about the entity, the merchant on record, right? So the European bank is dealing with a US entity is different from the European bank dealing with a EU entity, if you see what I mean. We can take it offline just for that piece. It's just that is, Martin, correct me if I'm wrong, but that is what you're alluding to essentially.
Yes, when you do donation or sponsorship, then you can deduction on your expenses. But this is only for when you're in the Netherlands. I sponsored, for example, I have a company, I sponsored the local chapter, or even if the AppSec EU takes place in Europe and I sponsor this, then I can have a different deduction for my income than when I sponsor something that's far away. Yeah.
So at the moment we're keeping the EU entity. I think probably
exactly. You sponsor the EU entity and the bank account is then transparent in this, but you sponsor through the entity. That's where you have to. Yeah.
What way has it happened in the past? So like when we've had an EU conference, have they been sponsoring the EU entity, or have they been sponsoring OWASP as a like an American entity, US entity? Like we should know this information already, and maybe this isn't actually an actual issue.
Yeah, it's actually when you do sponsor the conference, the global conference in the past, we had set up a special accountant set up for the Fed and everything, Texas. So it's when you sponsor a local event, or that part went through the local the European entity.
Yeah.
So to Sharif's point, I think we can take this offline, but like I said, the European entity, the Belgian entity is not going away. It's still going to be there. It will be connected with Money Corp, and it will be connected with the bank account that we're going to set up. It will specifically say OWASP VZW, and we'll do what we need to do to to handle sponsorships if that comes up. But we can take this offline. So
exactly. All in all, it's actually a great effort and will save us a bit of money. So thank you so much, Tom.
Cool.
Okay. Well, I'll hand it back over to Andrew.
Oh.
Thank you.
Can you stop sharing your screen, Tom?
Oh yeah, sorry. There you go.
Cool. And I just need to. Can everybody see my screen again? So Andrew, did you have a chance just while I remember?
Hang on.
No, it's yeah, we'll come back to it at the end. So do we the AppSec virtual profit and loss? Is that next, or do we want to move down to further? We haven't spoken about that yet, have we?
Sorry, I'm just looking at the minutes and I don't see the minutes for the special meeting. I'm going to have to get Dawn to help us out with that. We'll probably have to approve the special minutes at the next meeting. So let's not worry about that.
Yeah,
Okay.
no worries.
He was preparing on the AppSec virtual profit and loss.
Oh, I know, yeah, but Andrew was doing was trying to figure out that while I was talking, but that's no problem, Andrew. In relation to the AppSec virtual profit and loss financial package, does somebody want to talk through that during this, or is it just for board reading?
Board reading at this point, because the reality is we need to work out what we're going to be recognizing and what's going to be deferred. We've already refunded everyone who needed refunding, I believe. So the reality is that at this moment, just consider it as a point in time profit and loss. We will know more as to what its actual profitability and will be in the coming, probably next week, I think.
Right, and I put that together more for Emily and Kelly to see the actual details, but also wanted to share with you all, where we're at now, and I'll redo it again and update the October financial package when I get the specifics.
No problem. So moving along, so there are e-votes to read into the minutes. So first e-vote to approve.
If you refresh this, if you refresh, you'll get the vote result. There you go.
Yeah, cool. Sorry, I was just waiting on that information before. Or yeah, maybe it's a different one. The motion is to approve virtual elements of the event strategy, which intends to spend $41,500 of gross income, with a gross income of $259,000, likely netting $217,500 profit. So the motion is resolved that the foundation is permitted to plan and run the virtual component of the event strategy with an approved budget of $41,500 to run the nominated events through 2021. And just for reference, these are events that are referenced in the special board meeting minutes that will be made available at a later time. So Sharif sponsored, Vandana seconded, the doodle is there, but so there was 6 people that have said yes. Gary didn't vote, everybody else said yes. The results passed 6-1. The second e-vote is to decide on a date for a January special meeting. So the result is 2-hour meeting, or two-hour meetings will be held in November 13th, 14th, 2021 at 5 p.m. GMT. So the motion was to put a vote to decide on the best 2 days for the special board meeting. 8 people participated, 5 from the next board, Tom Papas and Dawn Aiken, as well as the new board has not convened. The 3 participants are not on the board. This is not a formal vote for the board. So new business, motion to approve the reviewed policies. So note, the following policy was approved in October, but it may not have been clear that the top part of the policy had been through the community policy review process. So it was the code of conduct. And let's see if this works. Yeah. So Andrew, do you want to talk us through this part?
Yep. So this was a draft. It went through the community review process, and there was some feedback, which is actually available to you if you wish to read it. The fundamentals part is that there's a lot more bullet points here, and it covers off harassment and a few other things, which is what the lawyers asked us to include. So the reality is that it's a lot stronger at the top section. The sanctions bit is the bit that was voted on last month, but when it went into position, the entire thing, including the top part, had actually gone in. And I don't think that was very clear in last month's vote. So we're asking again for you to consider this. But this has completed the community review process, and all changes from the community feedback has been incorporated.
Did the board feel that they're in a position to vote on this now, or would you like time to read through it and change this to an e-vote if we need to e-vote on this particular element of the code of conduct? Would it be cleaner?
So Andrew, just correct me if I'm wrong. This has already gone through.
Yes.
And been approved just in piecemeal, as opposed to the entirety of that policy or document on its own. Is that correct?
Yeah, so what happened was last month, the sanctions part was voted upon and was included, but it was included with this text. And so what's really happened here is that the bottom part you voted on with full cognizance. The top part had been through the community review process, and it ended up in this. I just wanted to make very clear that this top part is part of the 3 policies that need to be approved this month or pushed to an e-vote.
So there are parts of this that haven't been voted on or are new, are you saying?
They're not new. what has happened here is that the top part ended up on the website without being approved. So the top banner still shows draft, but it is actually final. It's the same as the other two as well. It's just that unlike the other two, this one ended up coming in as the only version last month because that's what was voted upon. The draft that you voted upon last month contained this text. However, I think it'd be worthwhile to make sure that everyone is aware that the top part had changed and that you're voting explicitly upon the top part in this month.
Okay.
So in my eyes, it sounds like it should be moved to an e-vote, and that people should read this top part to verify that you're happy with it, and it would require potentially discussion if there's any elements that people aren't happy with.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So.
I'll get the
Sorry,
e-vote
Sharif,
set up.
go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna add one just quick thing. The code on conduct part of this, the top part, was that also taken from the events code of conduct verbiage that we use?
I would actually have to go back and talk to the policy review team to find out what they've done. It does look that way, yes. But I don't see the photography stuff here, so maybe not. I would have to go back. Can I do that on notice?
No, it's fine. But regardless, we'll do an e-vote on this, and that should be fine.
So this is a single
makes
motion.
sense.
Did you want to just do e-votes for each of the policies separately and table this?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm in favor.
Before we do table the motion completely, the leaders policy as it stands there only includes the feedback that came through the policy review team's preferred method, right?
No, that actually included the feedback, including the GitHub and other places as well. The policy review team did actually take the feedback that was submitted before that policy was put into place, because there was quite a lot of it. And in addition, it is my understanding, Bill's coming. It is my understanding that the feedback for the leaders policy included some late feedback from Torsten, because his feedback wasn't on the feedback spreadsheet. And so they've included that as well, I believe. I'll get you an answer on that one.
Could you update the link as well on the feedback, because it's returning a 404?
Okay.
Yeah. I just tried to open it. It might be something for future board meeting, just to verify that all the links are working, or pointing to what we intend, or they're intended to.
Yep, that's fair.
Cool. So do we, based on not having the feedback, do we want to table the 3 policies and put them into e-votes for this week so that people can review? Everybody's nodding, so
Yes.
so we'll table that.
Okay.
Sharif?
No, I was going to say I'm in favor, yeah.
Okay, yeah, cool. Sorry. So the next is motion to approve Global AppSec Australia 2021 and establish an Australian entity. So the motion is resolved that the foundation is directed to run an in-person Global AppSec in Australia, which requires setting up an Australian entity. The proposed budget is $290,000 in income, $234,000 in expenses, for a projected net profit of $55,000. Vandana has sponsored it. I'll second it so that we can move to that discussion. Is there anything that anybody would like to bring up in relation to this?
Now, how comfortable are we that these numbers are accurate?
Well, 290 minus 234 is actually not 55, so that's a problem. I hate to be that guy. Sorry.
No, that's fine.
I just read what was written there. Fall into that trap next month and just write something a little Easter egg in there.
Sorry, it is actually $56,000 net profit. No, that's fair. at the end of the day, basically, Daniel has an extremely detailed budget, and he was actually more than on target with his budget in 2019. He earned a fair amount of money then, and I don't doubt the numbers he's got for this one. However, there are some unknowns. One of them is whether or not, well, Australia has basically just gone with eliminating COVID again, and the vaccines are due. So we're talking about late October next year. So I think the chances of actually running it and getting Australian and possibly New Zealand, Japan, and Singapore in a travel bubble is likely. So I think this is pretty likely, but there's always going to be a risk because we don't know if Australia will open its borders because they've spent, 3 months in hard lockdown to get rid of COVID. It's unclear as to whether or not they're opening their borders at this time.
You never know, but how many people attending the last conferences have been from Australia, within Australia and outside?
The last attendance figure I got from them was about 1,100, but the reality is it's primarily a regional conference. It is a conference that is attended generally by New Zealand and Australian individuals, but there is an element of Asian folks coming from Singapore, Japan, and other places, but it is like.
Do we have any figures, Andrew, to denote how many are Australian and how many are coming out from outside of Australia, just in case they don't have the borders open, and whether that's in line with the forecasted budget here? So I know that the numbers of, I think it was potentially 400, was it, Andrew, of potential attendees
Yes.
that this budget is based off.
Yeah, they're looking at basically the same floor space, but 400 for social distancing purposes. The reality is, unless there was invoicing, we're not probably going to know where they came from. I can always reach out to Daniel. Emily probably has some detail from Eventbrite, from the ticketing system. It may be possible to work that number out, but I don't know what it is right now.
Yeah, it would be useful to know. It is a big expense for very little profit, but I guess in other times, if COVID wasn't around, we would be jumping at the opportunity of an 1,100 person conference in Australia. So I guess from these, we just need to play it cautious.
So there is another thing that isn't on this motion. Daniel got back to me last week. There is actually a grant that the Australian government is doing. This is actually part of the Cyber Month event sequence. So every October in Australia, the Australian government runs Cyber Month, and we were one of the larger conferences to run during that time, which is why we have about 1,100 people come. The Australian government is currently running a grant process for companies in Australia, which is why we also need an Australian entity, to ask for between 100,000 and 750,000. It may be possible for us to apply for a grant for the totality of this expense. But obviously, again, this is a great unknown as to whether or not we would get the grant.
Do you have any timelines as to when the grant is due by, what's involved in applying for it, and how we so is it possible to postpone the decision of approving this conference based on the fact that it's October next year until we have further details around the grant and then maybe geographics and seeing how things are going? Does it need to be approved this early? I know it's a year in advance and conferences take a long period of time, but from our discussions, there was it was basically going to be potentially hiring or contracting Daniel in to organize the conference based on the fact that we might not be able to travel.
Yeah, let me just share with you the grant. It's going into chat. So this is the grant that we were talking about. So it is open, it is closing on the 30th of November. Now, the reality is that we would have to I think, establish an Australian entity to even apply for this. And I don't know if we've got time to do that before this closes. But at the end of the day, read the guidelines, meet the eligibility criteria, and away we go. So as a small to medium enterprise, which I think we still qualify as, and we would basically have to complete it within the time frame specified. So we've got to have an ABN. Now, that means we could potentially approve the Australian entity be set up, which would be about a $5,000 thing. I could try to get that done this week, but it only gives us essentially 6 days to get an Australian entity set up. So we got an ABN, and therefore we can actually go through and apply for the grant. So
it sounds like not much time to do that, and it sounds like something that would potentially impact our decision on that potential loss.
yeah, it does say that we can be an incorporated association, which we are, but we're not incorporated in Australia. But we could certainly apply for it in detail in the grant without having.
But yeah, my thing always is for grant, they expect something back. Are we as organization mature enough to take on responsibility where we actually have to deliver something to according to specs and expectations? I never saw us as in the past being mature enough for this project management, following up everything, and there's a risk in this.
Yes.
And that's totally in risk grants, but currently our community, it's all volunteers. We are not able to align our projects in standard layout, whatever. How mature are we? Are we mature enough to go on for such a responsibility? What actually it's hard to do.
This grant is about running a conference, right?
Yeah, and this team has run that conference before and had quite successful. However, I do agree. It's actually one of the risks I bring up in the presentation you're going to see in a couple of minutes.
Andrew, just a quick question. Is this an annual grant?
No, this is a one-off.
So do we have an Australian business number?
No, we would actually have to form an entity to get that. Australia actually does have a digital economy, so it wouldn't take long to apply for one, but to do it properly, I think we would need some advice. The fact that the second arm of that grant process says an incorporated association, we could always put into the grant that we will set up an Australian entity to continue OWASP mission in Australia.
Would it be worth, Andrew, changing the motion to vote on setting up the Australian entity at the $5,000 expense, and then submitting for this? So there's no. I don't think that there's I don't think it's an issue submitting for this before we understand. If we're able to set it up in a short space of time and submit prior to the 30th deadline, then I think that's something that will definitely change our opinion and also impact the vote.
Yeah.
If we table it for now, does that make sense?
These things can go in parallel. I think we need to decide whether we would want to go forward if we do not get the grant. That we can decide today, or unless you want to mull it over and have an evo, because I think that's important. Because you can't tell, even if we form this corporation, we have no idea if we'll be approved.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't know, do we have enough information as a board to approve a potential loss?
I have one question for you, Andrew. The budget that was put together, was that based on previous years of Daniel's success?
It was. It's scaled down to 400 attendees, but a similar amount of money for the actual event location.
Okay, in those previous events, was Kelly involved at all?
Yes.
Okay. I was just wondering if we were getting potential for extra sponsorships, but apparently maybe not.
Yes, is the answer, because the reality is that we had to do some bartering in 2019 because some of the larger sponsors only wanted to just deal in Australian dollars. So I believe Kelly helped around 12 sponsors, but there were about 30 odd sponsors in total. So I would like, for example, the Australian entity to be established to allow all of the sponsors to be given GST invoices, which is the actual problem.
Okay, so we're going to postpone, or sorry, Martin.
Yeah, sorry. So that's the same problem we had in Europe. So what we see is where we have bigger conferences or bigger revenue, we should have an entity there, a legal entity. But then we also must make sure what is the impact of having those legal entities for us as corporations and a foundation.
It's going to cost us around $2,000 to $3,000 a year in accounting fees to keep it alive.
Money is one side, but the other is other regulations, because you need a board, you need a meeting. It's not a company, it's not nothing. It's not just paying money and you get a business account. It's more than that. We have to be really aware of this as well.
Yeah. Well, as an Australian citizen, I could actually establish it.
Like
So,
in fairness, we have a EU entity, and we also have a board, but they're not. It's not a board like this board.
Yeah.
Which Gary is also on.
And that can lead us to problems.
I was going to say, but there's also, that says an Australian business number. You know, do we need to be a charity there? Is there any issue with us being a business there?
The deal is that to set up a charity is more complicated. We've actually had discussions with John DeLeo, because the reality is setting up a charity is about $10,000 to $15,000, and you're still sort of eligible to pay tax. And so it might just be an example where we might just be better off having just a normal profit-making entity in Australia, because the tax rate in Australia is 10%, and that's not the entire story, because you get GST inputs and GST outputs, and you settle up the difference at the end of every quarter. So I won't lie, it is complicated in some ways, but it's simpler than the American tax system by far.
Everything is.
yeah, I was going to say that's not terribly hard.
Yeah.
No,
Andrew, just this motion as it stands, the income and expenses does not account for potentially getting that grant.
No, it does
Correct?
not, because it was written, the minutes were written before the grant became a thing that I was aware of. I actually learned about the grant on Wednesday last week.
Okay, so we could actually vote on this motion as it stands, because it doesn't rely on us getting the grant. This is literally just, this is what it's going to cost. This is what it potentially will bring in.
Yeah,
Yes.
the other thing
Yeah.
to note is if we do apply for the grant for running the event and the grant covers the expenses, that means that we can get up to, if it's successful, $290,000 $290,000 instead of 55.
Yeah,
Is that Australian dollars or US dollars?
US dollars.
it's real dollars, Gary, real dollars.
Australian dollars are slightly less valuable than American dollars. I think it's
Yeah.
about a 75-cent ratio at the moment.
It's still legal currency.
Yes,
Despite looking like plastic, actually being plastic.
it is plastic. We were the first nation to actually have them because we developed plastic notes.
So I'm happy to vote on it as is, and then we can probably take an e-vote on the grant and see if it can, if you're confident of getting it in time.
But sure, the more
so-
pertinent vote then is, do we establish an entity? That's what we need to do first.
Well, the
Yeah,
motion includes the entity. It basically says set up, global AppSec in Australia in 2021, and part of the motion is setting up the legal entity, which will account for $5,000.
One important question, Andrew, I'm assuming you would know the answer to this. What is our backup or back out plan? Does the venues there in Australia follow force majeure, and are there potentials for moving into the following year, things that we've already encountered here?
Yeah, so we've already made it really clear to Daniel that we wouldn't be signing a contract unless we're allowed to move it without penalty. The other part of it is that essentially, yes, force majeure is a real thing over in Australia. So if the government forces a mandatory closing, that is generally force majeure because it's out of everyone's control.
Right. Okay. So as long as you're looking at potentially moving it to 20. Now, is there a way in the contract to put language that even if the government doesn't shut it down, but if all other indications, such as the government prohibiting foreigners to come into the country, even though Australia might be open, that would be sufficient for us to want to move it?
That's certainly something we can discuss with the event location. I don't know the answer to this right now because the reality is we haven't even, we could go back to the Melbourne Exhibition Centre, which is where it was previously held. That is an a Victorian government entity. So the other choice that Daniel was positing was a larger, more open space at the town hall. But the reality is we haven't really chosen the event location yet. And I think the event location probably should be chosen on whether or not we get favorable terms.
You know, you'll also be getting a lot less people than you had the last one.
Yeah, we're still
40%.
expecting, we're expecting to have to do social distancing for some time. And that's why we're planning for 400 people.
Right. So there might be other venues available.
Absolutely. Melbourne is a major city. It's like, 4.5 million people. There's always other places you could go.
Just to rein it back in from a timing perspective, because we still need to go through the presentation. Are we happy to vote? So I've seconded it. If for discussion purposes, are we happy to vote on this now? Just want a yes from everybody just to make sure.
Yes.
Supportive.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
So in the order that I'm seeing everybody, Grant,
Yes. Melbourne's a nice city.
Sharif,
Yes.
Gary,
Australia.
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Richard,
Yes.
Vandana,
Yes.
and I'm a yes.
Okay. What I'll do is I will work with Daniel to get more information about the grant and whether or not as a American entity that's incorporated, can we apply? There's nothing worse than missing a grant and never putting it in when we have an opportunity to get it. I just don't think it's going to be possible to get an ABN and a fully formed organization by the time this is actually due to be delivered as a grant.
Would it be possible to, like, say, submit for that and then just detail in the application that we have applied for the ABN and are in the process of its completion or something like that, rather than just leaving the grant if we can't get it by then? At least we would be in a position to be considered, given like the fact that they held a conference last year. We might have a little bit of a push with it.
Yeah.
I think that's what Andrew meant.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me get back to Daniel. We'll get the grant started. And generally, these things are not too complicated. I don't want to overcomplicate our proposal. I just want to make sure that we actually get a chance of getting it, because if we do, it'll be fantastic. It'll really make the profitability of this event much better.
And I'm trying to get you some help on the grant writing side as we speak.
Okay, thank you. Really appreciate it. Okay, thank you.
So, Andrew, just checking so we don't have the previous the special meetings board meeting minutes. Do you want to go into this section?
Yeah, so the reality is I was hoping Emily would have this information to me, and the reality is that the information that you're actually after, one of them was sponsorship. Now I did spend, shall I share my screen and show you what we have received?
Yeah, sure. I
Okay.
can stop sharing.
Okay, let's go to screen one. And give me a tick while I just work out where it is, because I definitely got it. Oh, goodness gracious. Okay. Okay, so one of the things that I was very interested in about this is essentially how likely would sponsors do various things for us. So let me just open this up. See if we can get a bit more. Nope, I want bigger.
We didn't ask them about Australia.
Sorry.
It was Richard mentioning that you didn't ask them about Australia. In it.
Yeah, no, Kelly, these are the questions that Kelly put up, and we honestly, I forgot about that, sorry.
This was
Oh,
based
it's-
on
oh, it's-
the this was based on the event plan before Australia, right?
Yeah. So how likely would you
And-
be willing to attend and participate as an exhibitor in a face-to-face? Mostly, I would have to say that it's, the unlikely is less prevalent than likely and very likely. But the fact that so many people are on the fence about it is a tiny bit of a worry. But you generally, if you say, for example, that if you add these two together, you get 33% will come, and then 16% wouldn't definitely come, then, you know, it's a 2-to-1 ratio if you take away the, you know, ambiguity in the middle.
Yeah, also keep in mind, 12 is a very small sample size, so we have to be aware of that.
We only had around 25 sponsors, I believe, for the AppSec San Francisco. So we've got about half of the people who participated in the AppSec Virtual most recently.
No, but that should not be the sample base, because you're talking about a face-to-face. So that would be, you know, all the people that have sponsored events in North America in the past.
This is all we had that answered. She did send it out to everyone who participated in AppSec Virtual. So it is what it is. I do agree that we would love to have more data, but the reality is this is what we have. How likely would you be interested in sponsoring a virtual global AppSec? Again, much more likely in this case. So if we were to go down the path of saying, let's just run a virtual event or just do a smaller virtual event, they're very likely to participate. But the unlikelies are still, you know, 15% of the total. But that's still better than not running it. So I think we would get support. Now, the way that we're doing the smaller events is how likely would we be willing to sponsor 4 to 6 virtual events held throughout. The reality is that, again, we do get 60% saying yes and 40% saying no. So I think we've got a different mixture of people, but it's still mostly positive.
And that's more than enough, because that's 6 that said yes, and we have 6 virtual events. We only need 1 for each of them.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm okay with this.
I hope we're not limiting it to 1.
No, I agree with you on that, Richard. But at least 1.
Yeah. The information and feedback here is very good, in fact. And I think, honestly, the maybe option should have been there. The reality is that they would like to have more information. We need to develop this more. I think, honestly, now that we've been approved to run those virtual events, we should develop that marketing package as early as possible and get them into their hands. Okay, what kind?
As far as that comment up there, number 7, if you can scroll up a little bit, that's what all vendors are trying to deal with now. That really isn't something that we could do a lot about. You know, there's nothing can replace face-to-face to talk to someone to see if they're worthwhile the time, as opposed to somebody just sitting with their feet up, you know, trying to get swag or whatever, or enter a contest. So, you know, it's a real issue, but there's not much we can do about it in the virtual world that I'm aware of. Right?
Yeah.
Limited platforms that have any kind of enhancements. I mean, there are some out there that are that are quite pricey that can offer a few more things, but I don't think it's worth us investing in that.
Sure. We are looking at a lower cost option than what we did this year, though. At the end of the day, basically, we need to learn a little bit more about the fact that the booths did not really work. The capture the flag, like capture the swag type of thing, definitely did not work. So virtual space that forces engagements is practically impossible. I think the only way we can really do this is ask them to do adverts at the beginning or throughout the actual sessions. It's practically impossible to get people who don't want to go and interact with vendors in a face-to-face situation. You can put them in the middle of the food and that forces the engagements. There is no equivalent of food. So this one here, the more executive sponsored events, this is actually the first thing we're going to be doing in the early new year with a panel. And we're going to be trying to focus on that CISO type, an AppSec manager type of role. So at least some of the events will be around this particular market, and we will try to get many sponsors for those rather than just one. They're not interested in participating until the end of the year. The reality is that we need to think about this more globally. Places like Australia that have good adherence to vaccinations and already don't have COVID now, probably very likely that October next year is going to be fine. But in America, who knows? Let's hope that it works out. Live conference, they prefer it. They would like it, the whole leads list. The reality is that we tiered our sponsor benefits based around the top tier getting the leads list and in subset. Now we did give, because there was limited interactions, we did give leads to many of the folks. But yeah, we need to revisit that whole leads list issue. And what gives us interaction within the web.
Can you elaborate on the whole leads issue?
Yeah, so we basically asked registrants, would you be okay with receiving information from sponsors? And so it was an opt-in for GDPR reasons. The reality is everyone on that list, and it was over 55% of the people who attended actually said yes. That is the whole leads list that we're able to provide the sponsors. Now, when we established the virtual AppSec event, the 25K sponsorship got you that list. As it became very clear that some of the other interactions, such as booths and whatnot, just weren't getting the interactions that they were wanting, to make it right with the other people, we gave them the whole leads list. That was probably not ideal because it sets up a precedent. But the reality is, for many of the people here, they didn't get any interactions. They don't understand who they were talking to, and yada, yada, yada. The reality is that I would actually say that should probably be a standard feature going forward for all sponsor tier levels. But we need to figure out how we can better tier the virtual events.
And we also need to, Andrew, because I don't know if any of you guys actually signed up and received communications from the sponsors afterwards.
I have, and quite frankly, some of it's actually rather aggressive. And if that's what they're doing to our members, I feel bad.
Exactly. Some of it was really bad. Some of it was terrible. And unless there isn't enough money they can give us to make that right with our membership.
So sorry, go ahead.
I just want to say we need to make sure that we educate the sponsors as well about what they are allowed to do, what they should be doing.
I don't know if you're going to have a whole lot of success. This is just the nature of the business. Yeah. Come on.
Yeah, but I agree that normally we pull the people through the sponsors with having food, so people standing around there anyway, and that they physically talk to them because they can show stuff, they have physical swag, stuff like that. Virtual events will always have problems to pull people to a sponsor. So I actually, with this pre-announced 5-minute sponsor talk, and tell people, hey, please appreciate our sponsors, 5-minute sponsor talk, 10-minute sponsor talk, I think it's a good alternative. Yeah. Giving the lead list after approving the information we shared, it's okay. So I totally agree with that.
So I would actually suggest that we do what OSCERT does, which is an Australian conference. They actually have a vendor track what we could do is actually think about potentially allowing vendors to run like lightning talks demonstrating their service or product, and just making it short, and then, you know, giving people rewards for sitting through those sessions. I also think consuming the content whenever people have time is probably a better way of doing it than forcing people to sit in a seat and do yet another Zoom meeting. So
What kind of awards?
If I could suggest, people, you know, OWASP is on the more technical end. We're not selling to CISOs, we're not selling to CTOs. Those guys get the glossy brochures. Those girls get the bonkers, etc. Techies want to, you know, they show not tell. They want to use things.
POC or GTFO?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think Gary broke up there. Did he? Is he?
So
Brent, don't do this.
Can you hear me?
Gary,
This isn't one of our sponsors, right?
Gary,
You froze there.
try again, Gary.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm wondering why aren't these people given free demos? Why is it not you get on to XYZ vendors, go through their demo, blah blah blah, and then you get a free ticket to the conference, or that's part of the thing. They don't. A vendor track, in my opinion, is not I've seen it not work many times. Whereas if these guys and girls are interested in what the hell it is XYZ vendor is selling, give them a chance to use it, give them a chance to get stuck in. I think that's a real advantage that virtual events can have that you tend not to get in person.
Yeah.
So some of our sponsors get it. I'm not going to name names, but
that's why I said XYZ. Yeah.
Yeah. One of them has a COVID work from home kit. If you go to one of their demos, they'll send you a bunch of cool swag.
Yeah, but okay, but we can help them, we can advise them, but we cannot make them to do something like that, right? And you don't want to have
if we
10
facilitate
work from home. Yeah. I said we can help advise, but we cannot have like
Yeah.
you don't want attendees have like 10 work from home packages.
I could always use
It's not
another
our,
headset.
yes. Yeah.
I'm just cognizant of time, and we're coming up on 10 minutes to go through about 15 slides. I think we're solutioning.
Well, you did send this out. We should have all looked at this already. So
yeah.
Just breeze over and hit the key points.
Yeah, so essentially the actual written responses, some of them are very interesting. The business emails is almost impossible to do. Many people attend on their own behalf and don't actually do it. And if we blocked Gmail, we wouldn't get registrations.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. Just ignore it.
Yeah. Some of the other ones, like we get staff support communication was great, and then better communication. I don't understand how we get both of those in the same thing. And obviously it depends on the vaccine. I think the way we actually treat this is that we're trying to be more diversified in where we hold events so that we're not reliant upon just the US market alone. There was a suggestion that we use a different platform. I think honestly, Bizzabo had its pluses and minuses, and I think overall there are certain things that we certainly learned from that suggest that we won't be using Bizzabo again.
Yeah, if I can jump in to try to help you a little bit, Andrew, with this, because we're running out of time. Overall, there does not seem to be a compelling a compelling amount of people in support of a physical event, but certainly for virtual, either one or several. So I think it basically mirrors what a lot of us were feeling based on our previous discussion.
Sure.
I also want to say it always comes back on adoption on vaccine and everything. That's a government thing. That's local government. It's not us. So they come with rules on what we have in person meetings. We don't want to collect or run out or request anything that's not in line with any local government.
Yeah. Well, at the end of the day, basically, as I said before, when we were talking about this last month, we might ask people to self-assert that they've had the vaccine, but I don't think we're in a position to hold health information or even evaluate what the health information is. Like my vaccination record.
We cannot do that.
No.
It's depending.
No.
If the local government requests us to collect it, we will request. Otherwise, we don't do that.
And that's that I think that's maybe another conversation for something outside of this. And as we've only 8 minutes left,
We can,
to move on to
we
this.
can always get people's health information from China.
Okay. I'd just like to go through this real quick. What I might do is give you the slides to read after the session, but I just want to go through the reason why. I think honestly, we're not going to get to the individual slides. Okay, why reform? We need to spend more on mission. Historically, the board has always granted more money than the chapters and projects have overspent. So the board has always been in a position where they think that we should spend X amount and we've only spent a fraction of it. Unfortunately, our policies have often led to situations where people cannot spend. I think, Richard, you've experienced it. As a project leader, I've absolutely experienced it. We need to stop saying no to each other and actually start saying we need to enable OWASP to execute our mission. So we need to change the way we do things. We also need to reduce our costs and reduce our admin overhead. I don't think staff should be involved in evaluating the pros and cons of a lot of the things we do. As long as it's compliant with mission and we can actually clearly state that it is, we should just be going ahead and doing it. So 83% of all chapters cannot host a meeting. Like if they host a meeting, they might be only able to host 1 or 2. Now, not a big deal right now because no one's really meeting in person, but that's going to change. 74%, like nearly 3/4, do not have any real funds. And if you're a project leader who's committed to actually getting something done, you can't spend it on yourself. This actually caused us problems in 2012. I got a grant from the Department of Homeland Security to work on the OWASP developer guide, and it was enough money for me to work for 3 months. And during that time, I could have really updated it and put it out there. I wasn't permitted to spend that money. And so I actually used it to go to AppSec US in 2013 to try and get more volunteers. That was a really poor use of funds. We've got to stop saying to each other we can't do things. And in fact, for grants, which is a thing that I'll talk about in a tick, we absolutely do need to be able to say, yes, you can work on that. Now, the other thing is that our expense claim numbers are going down hugely. So at the moment, we basically have 88 chapters with no money, 35 chapters with negative balances that should be zeroed out. Small balances are those that would be insufficient to run 4 meetings, and the default balance of $500. So you can see that only 52 chapters have any sort of money at all, but they actually have more than 90% of all the chapter money, like more than 90% of it. So the reality is that if we want chapters all over the world to hold meetings, we can't continue what we're doing at the moment. Plus, this is a nightmare to administer. Many people just don't know where to find out what their current balance is. And when I told the Austin chapter what their balance was, which is negative $3,500, they were incredibly surprised. I was surprised because we shouldn't have been approving expenses that went negative, but here we are. So here is the chart of the expenses over time, and the dotted red line is the trend. And even before COVID, 2017, 2018, and 2019, you can see the extraordinary decline in expense claims. This is correlated with chapter meetings just not happening, or chapters giving up on claiming expenses. We just don't know. So what's really happening here is that the expense system is not functional. We're at below 2010 levels of expense claims. That's just insane. We've got nearly 3 times as many members making the same number of claims, and that's just ridiculous. So we have to fix it. Ignore 2020. 2020 is a special year all of its own.
Andrew, can I ask? So in Dublin's case, what we've always done in the past is we've asked people to just sponsor things, so they would buy it, or pay for the venue or some stuff like that.
Yep.
So our expenses would have been would have been a lot at the beginning when I took over the chapter, but then as we progressed, we literally spent nothing and had a big balance because people were sponsoring us at that point. So it could also be a move towards that.
Yeah, so
Hopefully.
bartering needs to become a formal part of the expense policy. At the end of the day, or the donations policy, at the end of the day, basically we do need to modify what we do and encourage chapters to do that. The Melbourne chapter, for example, when they have in-person meetings, costs them $2,500. But if you actually look at it, they get a lot of in-kind bartering arrangements. And as a result, their expenses aren't that high in monetary terms. But they couldn't afford to do it with their current balance. You know, they wouldn't be able to even hold one singular meeting. So the budget status, the reality is we are structuring it around our programs. So pretty much if you think about the committees we have, that's how the budget is structured. We'll be allocating funds and breaking it down in that way. And I'll be working with Vandana and the overall board to pick and choose where we're going to spend our money. Obviously, when we're not meeting in person, I think next year will be a unique year where we won't give chapters that much money, whereas we would normally probably donate the most amount of money to them. The other thing is that essentially we've got to get rid of the end of balances. So we also need new sources of income, giving donations and seeking grants, and we really got to get into it. There's a Giving Tuesday next week. You'll see some announcements on our social media asking for donations for Giving Tuesday. We absolutely do need to fundraise on a regular basis. So I would appreciate if you could retweet to your social media friends the Giving Tuesday fundraising. We're also going to be working on trademark and merchandise programs. We got stuck prior to 2019 being an event company. We need to be OWASP and actually get income from all these different places. You'll have a draft on your desk by December 15, and I expect we'll be ready to approve it at the first board meeting. And so I'll make sure that Jubin and Bill and obviously the rest of the board is involved in establishing this thing. So it'll just be a consent vote. Basically, here is the philosophies. You can read that when I give you the slides. The policy changing, I think, honestly, this is where I might stop the presentation, but the reality is I'm going to keep the fundamentals of the expenses, events and donations policies. The reality is they've already been through the policy review process. They only need to have a few things nipped and tucked, and I don't want to lose the feedback we got from the community by rewriting it completely. So the only thing is we're decoupling balances, changing the approval limits, putting temporary restrictions as a formal thing, because at the moment I'm operating under decree with temporary COVID restrictions. The fact is no one's spending, but that's okay. But also I want to dissolve travel into its own policy, because the reality is there was an example last week where one of our best leaders, Ryotaro-san, traveled to meet with the Japanese government in a different city, and we had to deny his expense claim. And that should never have been happening. I'd love to be able to get to a place where everyone understands how travel works. For a seasoned and awesome leader like Ryotaro to get it wrong says our current system is not working. And I'm going to reach out to him and try to make it right with him. We need to decouple chapters from events. And the reason for that is that we need to be able to let projects, committees, and obviously the foundation run events. I really need us to actually simplify the number of event types we have from 7 to 2. It's too complicated at the moment. And also we're going to improve the way we do budgeting for events. Martin, you saw this with Benelux. You didn't get a budget you could actually do. It was like, why am I needing to do this budget? It's crazy. I don't need to do an extensive budget. We're going to simplify the budget process for those types of events.
I think the request process must be very clear, because you want to say, first thing you want to say is, I want to hold an event.
Yeah.
Please welcome, and then guide to the process. Okay,
yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, we're definitely going to be doing an events videos that people can watch. We can refer them to on how to actually apply and what the process and timelines are going to be like. There are going to be some new policies, awards and scholarships, grants and travel. We've had some issues in the past where certain folks have given away prizes or scholarships or free tickets to people with no obvious mechanism that was said, this is how you get that ticket. It was just that you happened to be in the right place at the right time. Also, we want to stop any perceived self-dealing. So, for example, if a committee wants to travel to an event because they're hosting an event at, say, for example, a global AppSec, that'll be approved under the travel rather than the awards and scholarships area. We want to make it a lot simpler for people to do the right thing. What I do want to talk about though with you before we leave is the donations policy. The donations policy has been through the policy review process, and after talking with SEBA recently, it's still not right. I think when you get this slide deck, I'd really appreciate it if you could have a read through here. What is it that we want to do? Because restricted grants are restricted for a reason. They're just very difficult for us to deal with. So with the new balance situation, you don't need to have restricted donations because it will always give you money as long as you've got a grant that's actually working on something. However, there might still be donors who will only give us restricted grants. We've got to make it easier for them and understand the reasons why we may not be getting them. The number of restricted grants or donations that we've received in the last 24 months is 4. So it's not a big deal, but is it 4 because we don't have the right policy, or is it 4 because no one's really doing it? I'd like to ask for more grants, but if that's a restricted grant, maybe we need to change the policy settings. So have a look at this slide when you get a chance. I think we probably as a board need to decide a little bit better on what the policy settings for donations should be. And that's definitely a board thing, not necessarily a foundation thing. Okay, so we've just gone over time. I'm very happy to take questions on the end of balances, either now, I'm able to stay, or alternatively, you can ask me offline. What is people's feelings about the end of balances and the policy reform I've talked about?
From my perspective, I have backed Mike on a number of occasions for the end of balances because I don't think that we would be doing our mission correctly if we're just saying that because somebody is based in, say, the likes of Dublin, because there's a lot of technology companies, we get a lot of sponsorship, that we should be the only ones able to hold our meetings. I would more prefer one pot of money, and so that everybody, no matter where they are or who they are, is able to use the foundation to spread the mission. And I think that's what we're trying to achieve, rather than just saying that I have 90,000 of a balance just sitting there year on year. I'm not actually doing anything with it, whereas like Sharif could be using it in London because he doesn't have much sponsorship.
So I do want to point this out, for events like AppSec Cali and LostCon, they will retain their profits throughout. They are a special category in our accounting system already. They are not a form of a balance. They are literally a P&L center of their own. That was the biggest single change here, is instead of a split being given to various chapters, the events become their own type. So AppSec Cali will be AppSec Cali, and that's it. And so what this means is that AppSec Cali can fund grants from its own profits, but we're expecting that events would actually go forward and fund themselves year on year. So in time, we wouldn't need to reseed them all the time. Whereas with LostCon, with a negative chapter balance, we will have to reseed them from scratch. But after that, they should be profitable enough to be able to maintain their independence. Now, obviously, we have not voted on LostCon at the moment, so take that for a future year.
What happens to the balances in the 7 California chapters from the profits from AppSec Cali?
The reality is that, yes, they have a significant chunk of change, but I would suggest that it might just be best what we did with AppSec Cali from 2016 through to the end of when I was treasurer, which is we basically seeded the actual conference because you're not planning on running an event until at least, you said you weren't going to run an event in 2022. I don't want to have money just hanging around for 3 years while we wait for AppSec Cali to get back on track. In that time, we should be able to recover, because we're talking about 2022 in its entirety. We will be able to reseed AppSec Cali at that point and allow them to run as they've done in the past, which is essentially book the actual location, make sure that all the stuff that you need, like the AV companies and whatnot, have their deposits and whatnot. we'll just reseed it properly at that point.
So with the money that the chapters have earned is now going to be, you're proposing putting it into a central pot, correct?
Yeah, and then for the board to actually allocate that out to grants and expenses.
Okay, so in the past, your predecessor was quite aggressive in prohibiting events in major US cities with higher cost of living from spending appropriately and successfully as they had for many years, such as Los Angeles. That was extremely problematic and led to a lot of bad interactions, including on the leaders list. And so, you know, this is a great unknown. This is the problem, and we need to avoid that at all costs.
So what I'm trying to do is, like, say for example, Martin wanted to actually run a podcast and he wanted to buy some AV equipment. He could apply for a grant to do that. It's not a chapter expense. It's literally a grant to do podcasts. And under the idea that he would deliver a certain number of podcasts in return for getting this AV equipment, that's a no-brainer. It's on mission. It's actually what we need them to do. I don't want to see a situation where we're saying no to leaders who've got great ideas, but it should be underneath the balance. So the idea is expenses are for petty cash, grants. Let me just go back to grants. Let me just see. Grants allow anybody, any leader, any member, any committee, projects or chapters to run and do things. So once a grant's been approved, the reality is that then you're on the hook for delivering it. So that actually comes back to the restricted donations risk that I was talking about before, and Martin brought it up earlier. If we allow donations for restricted donations and we're on the hook to deliver something and they didn't ask for enough money, they don't get it done, OWASP is on the hook for it. So we do need to be a bit careful about both issuing grants that are a little bit, you know, speculative, but also taking grants that are requiring us to deliver something that we may not be in a position to do so.
And what about normal expenses once in-person meetings can take place again?
Yeah, so that's what the expenses policy will do. Essentially, for most chapters who are hosting a meeting, they can just submit their actual amount. So for people like Melbourne that have very expensive chapters, I'm expecting them to have dual approvers. So there's a soft cap of 250, but above 250, like, I know that they spend quite a bit of money, but they also receive quite a bit of money. So the reality is it should wash out in the end. So expenses with dual approvers, they'll get their money. Now, we've had a few problems where people have submitted expenses a bit late. We do need to worry about that. But to your question, my goal is to make it much easier for people to expense chapter related or project related expenses.
All right, so the problem with this concept is that traditionally we have had difficulties getting chapter monthly sponsors. And that's why we started holding the conference 7 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
The conference funds the meetings throughout the year.
Yep.
If you take that away, then we will be operating in a negative balance.
So the idea is that APSEC Cali could still fund grants for the chapters that it's helping. So you could actually say, if on average it costs, say, Travis, I don't know, $15,000 a year to run his meetings, you could actually, as APSEC Cali, fund a grant that actually allows the Bay Area chapter to run 12 meetings and they've got $15,000. So you could actually still do that. It's just done in a different way. And
the criteria for approval?
Well, this is where I was saying that the expense policy has been through community feedback. My main goal with the expense policy is to make it a little simpler to apply for, put a soft cap on, and then basically keep most of the community feedback that has been received so far. Now, obviously this is a policy and there is a policy review process. So you've got another opportunity of providing that feedback.
And then the decision makers are who?
So the idea is that if it's less than $250, there won't be a decision, it'll just be paid. Above $250, it'll actually go to the relevant person, say for example, Lisa with chapters or Harold with projects. If there's significant cost, like serious cost, it'll come to me.
Okay, but again, I don't want to have a repeat of what we've had the last couple of years with your predecessor, where, you know, things were like, well, this seems like it's too much money, I don't want to approve it.
So as far as I'm concerned, if the board allocates, say, $50,000 for expenses and we're not running through it, it's fine. That's what's been happening. Yeah.
Yeah, we have a very clear policy on what you can spend, and I don't know what Richard, you've been very fake, and I don't know what you're going for. But when you have a meeting, and a meeting has normally expenses, and also you know that they have been trusted. So I know that some chapter meetings run with less than €200 of dollars, and some have more increased attendees, so that lunch, the beverages can be more than $1,000. If this is in balance with what the come in is, so when they say, okay, we all have this very exclusive chapter meetings, there may be $2,000 or $3,000, but also we have this annual conference related, then you can justify the balances. That's not a problem. Of course, when you got unlinked, like, hey, I happen to be in the Netherlands out of nothing, I make a new chapter, for example, and I want to have my first chapter meeting, I need $5,000, that will be questioned. I think that's very normal. That's only normal business. But if you have a known standard about that you have a conference in your area where you make money, and therefore this is all grown to become bigger, that's something different. It's not that when you have a chapter meeting and you want to spend more than $250, it's not coming out of blue air, thin air. It's something that has been built and grown. Is that kind of answering your question?
No, that's what.
That's what Andrew's predecessor also said. No,
that's what Andrew said. But my question is, you know, the devil's in the details, as they say. So, you know, so as long as the you know, we don't fall back in our bad habits and start saying, yeah, this seems like it's too much, we don't want to approve that, right? And
well,
that's
the policy. I really want to hold us back from such insinuations to people what they might or might not have said. I think that's not appropriate.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we want to look forward to have the right rulings to go in the future, and not going to hearsay from the past.
No, but we have to have a processes in place, documented, that prohibit that type of behavior.
Well, we have a new expense policy, and Andrew has detailed in the last probably half hour that he's looking to amend the expense policy as well. So, like that's going to be the Bible. Obviously, there's going to be edge cases that might not fit into that, but it's up to Andrew and staff to work with our chapters and projects to ensure that if it's mission based. Can I finish? If it's mission based and it's a worthwhile expense, then we should be able to fund it. But if it's not mission based and it's something that is excessive, and we're cutting our costs, then Andrew and staff have, by all means, they have rights to reject an expense based on the expense policy that we have.
So,
Andrew, I know what I think you understand where I'm going with this, right?
Yeah. So essentially, one of the things that I'm trying to do is decouple chapter activity from general spending by using grants. Grants are submitted before time, and as long as it's approved, you go for it. Now, at the end of the day, we've got new policies for grants, awards, and scholarships and travel. I would expect those to go through the full process of the policy review. You've all, I believe, been shared the revised expenses and revised other policies as well. Feel free to work on them with us to make it better, but they also need to go through the policy review process.
So, Andrew, I wanted to go back to something that you said earlier in the day to make sure that that is addressed prior to changes like this. So we mentioned that we have policies, we have best practices that have been signed, that have been approved by the board, but the processes are different. And in some cases, the staff say, well, we don't do it this way. And while the process is one thing and the policy is the other. And I know that you're going to deal with it in December, but my recommendation is prior to something like this being adopted, I'd strongly recommend that that's addressed so that the community is best serviced correctly,
Yeah.
as you will get an influx. The other one, and this is just a pet peeve, is just sort of the vernacular, the naming of the policies and so forth, but that's something for another day as well.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I'm expecting us to ramp up the way that we do expenses and whatnot. I'd like to do fast fail, get it somewhat right to start with and see how it works. We've got the ideal time right now to do this reform because we're not changing a running train. The train is actually stopped right now. Yeah. So we can keep on working on this and keep on modifying it whilst people start to get back into business. I would like us to be able to enter 2022 at a relatively full strength with a policy that's robust, that actually addresses some of the concerns that I have about people spending on inappropriate things, but also addresses the problems Richard has, that it seems arbitrary and capricious as to what will and won't be expensed. And so I think that's where we need to do that balance. And I don't know that we need to find it out right now, but Richard, I would encourage you to have a look at the expenses policy that I shared with you. Feel free to provide your feedback.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Of course, we need a policy, and I think always, we don't have unabundant money, but when we look in the abuse cases we had in the past, they're very little, and we have to encourage to spend on the mission. That's very clear. And of course, we have a policy and a process. Both have to work, but both, of course, as we're all humans, will not be flawless from the beginning. No. We need also review, press, and update and make sure that it will improve over time, and not like once a year. When we see that something's missed, we need some exception way to improve when something is not going wrong. Not monthly, but very quickly. Again, I think the abuse is really little, the risk is very little. Of course, on higher things, just make it happen. And then, yes, to say by default should be approved. That's my kind of stake. Except, of course, with higher values, you have to enable people. That's very important. And then, of course, this process will not be perfect from the beginning, but it's something we improve and build on. Currently, what you said, Andrew, I think you know the figures. We have one set that the whole chapters and everything is not even using $200,000. Yeah. So we have to encourage those also to money to be spent on the mission. It's really weird that we are non-for-profit. We should spend our money on a mission. We're not doing this right now.
That's right. And that's why I want to make sure that the board allocates as part of its strategic overview to the right amount to the new committees to allow them to encourage activity. I met with the education committee this morning, or at least parts of it, and I really encourage them to think about building out a grant that we could go and shop around for the curriculum, for an intro to AppSec and other things that I think are really on topic for us that we haven't had the opportunity of doing before because we didn't have a grants policy. I think if the board can help allocate the funds correctly, we can really get the mission moving. Even in a year, we're going to spend a lot less money than we normally do.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm conscious that it's very late for Vandana. Are we good with leaving it there? We had a good discussion, but discussions like that can also be done over email or in an executive meeting if we need to discuss further and that kind of stuff. So are we okay to adjourn?
Just a quick message for upcoming new board members, Jobin and Bill. I know Bill very well. I don't know Jobin, but you both have not, aired your thoughts probably out of courtesy, but you're new, but we welcome your thoughts. At the next meeting, feel free to speak up. You can't vote, but we welcome your input.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Noted.
Cool.
So motion to adjourn. Can I get a second?
Seconded.
Thanks, Gary. Cool. Thanks, everybody. Andrew, if you'd like to stop the recording,
Yes.
we can